जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की fateh. Welcome to the Everyday Sikhi Show, a weekly show. We look at how Gurbani, Gurmat can become helpful in our daily lives, give us inspiration and guidance. So, ਇਹ ਹਫਤੇ ਭਰ ਸ਼ੋ ਹੁੰਦਾ Everyday Sikhi Show. ਅਸੀਂ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਗੁਰਬਤ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੇਧ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜੀਵਨ ਹੈ ਹੋਰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਬਣ ਸਕਦਾ। ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਗੈਸਟ ਹੈ। So the special guest in today's show is Bhai Jagjit Singh ji, who lives in Wakefield near Bradford. So ਅਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਭਾਈ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ ਫਤਿਹ ਦੀ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। So today's show ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ we're going to ask Bhaji how he came into Sikhi, or ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ। ਤਾਂ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਭੈਣ ਭਰਾ ਹਜੇ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਛਕਿਆ, ਉਹ ਹਜੇ ਤੁਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ, those who are gradually coming into Sikhi, have some small tips and guidance for them in helping them to progress in their Sikhi journey. So we're quite a very practical show. We're using some real life experiences with Bhai Sahib. So Bhai Sahib, to start off with, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਥੋੜਾ background ਦੱਸ ਦਿਓ. Were you always into Sikhi and how you came in? So a bit about yourself. I
wasn't really always into Sikhi. Naturally, growing up in Slough, West London, parents used to take me to Gurdwara every Sunday. I used to Mathatek, go to Punjabi school. Enjoyed going to Gurdwara, but and never Punjabi really understood.
Sikhi di ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ Punjabi?
No, not really. Okay, Punjabi school was more about getting to know all the Punjabis in the town. It wasn't really about learning Punjabi. The headmaster put a lot of effort into it. He was actually the one that got me talking on stages at a very young age. He was very progressive, a very nice person, Hari Singh Sevak, and
जिन्हों ने खालसा school which we had ठीक है,
and it was a very good school.
Sikhi स्वरूप चाहते सी, did you have a jura, did you have a case?
No, at the age of about 11, 12, I started thinking about I just had thoughts and visions that I should be keeping case. Okay. But I never really understood it.
When you have vision means
no, I just knew in the future I was going to have case at some point. I never understood anything about Sikhi. It was nothing that I went to research.
Any Gurbani part?
At a young age, we're talking about 3 or 4, my mum always used to do Japji Sahib with me and my brother in the mornings.
And you remember that?
I remember that. Okay. And but because we never had no Sangat, my parents, they used to go to the Gurdwara, but they weren't Amritari, they didn't have case themselves, and so it wasn't really, we had no link with Sangat at that time. Okay. It was only later on when I was, my parents had kept their case and basically come into Sikhi, took an Amrit, started regularly going into Sangat, and that my father once took me to a student program, Sikhi program in Watford. And it was only there where I first saw, it was actually by Shiv Charan Singh. And he was doing the lecture, and I was quite amazed by his beard. I thought it was quite amazing.
He's got a very big beard.
Orange one.
Orange badda dada sahab ona da hega ya. Chitti dastar banni hundi na. Ta chole ch rehndे.
It was basically a bit of a culture shock for me that he's a Gora Sikh and he's basically in Bana, etc. And here was me who doesn't really know anything about Sikhi. And I listened to his lecture, was more impressed by him. Afterwards I got talking to him quite a bit, and I found him to be a very nice, very humble person.
Very down to earth.
And it was actually while I was at that student event that another young man, he didn't have case either, but he came up to me. He was on a stall for Khalsa Camp. He's now Bhai Manvir Singh from Smethwick, and he at that time didn't have a case, but he came up to me and he said, look, Bhaji, I don't know who you are, but you got to come to this camp.
Just to clarify, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੇਸ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਕੈਂਪ ਦੀ ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ਮੈਂਟ?
Yeah, he was basically, he was having a stall there, and he basically came up to me and he gave me this leaflet for Khalsa Camp. And at that time, because in growing up in Slough, we were encountering a lot of issues with the Pakistani gangs, and whereas my brother's generation were quite tough, 3 years older than me, and they never really had that many kind of problems, but we were getting them problems. One of my friend's younger brother had just passed away from being bullied bullied by one of these gangs. Right. He was only 11 years old when he was killed.
11 years old?
And we were about 17, 16 around then. And so we were quite, that had a big impact on us. And I was quite into kickboxing and martial arts, etc. And I thought I'd just go to this camp just to meet more Punjabi people. because we're very much into our community needs to come together and stand up.
ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੰਗਤ ਵੇਖਦੀ ਆ program, they might have seen adverts of these camps Facebook ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਚੈਨਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਕਦੀ ਕਦੀ ਦਿਖਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਸੰਗ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਪੋਸਟਰ ਵੀ ਲੱਗੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, but when they said, oh, that's not for me, or you know, sorry, they're probably going to be very religious, member to ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਿਆ, I don't know anybody. Can you relate your experience and any advice you'd give to the Sangha?
I didn't really go to the camp with any preconceptions. I didn't really go there for a dharmic side, because I didn't really know what a dharmic side was. I was just thinking that our community is getting these kind of problems.
So you're more like
need to be far more organised.
करके तुझे जा रहे, फिर शायद सारे कोई एक network बन जाएगा, कोई support मिल जाएगी.
And generally एक होना चाहिए अपनी community दा.
Okay.
And but when I actually got to Carl's camp, I was very much surprised.
So तुझे गए कितना, तुझे you drove there yourself, कितना तुझे पहुँचे?
No, the camp was in Cardiff, the Witsaga, and going from Slough, we most of the London went on a coach.
Okay.
Didn't know anyone at all, and but I've always been naturally confident, and but they all came up to me. Experience where people become surprised. Oh, Bhai Manvir Singh, you shook her hand and you sanu jappi pai hai na, kai apne mone ਭਰਾ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜੋ ਆਦਤ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਕਿ ਉਹਨੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਣਾ, ਜੱਫੀ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਮਿਲਣਾ ਜਾਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਦੇਣਾ, ਹਰੇਕ ਨਾਲ ਮਤਲਬ ਮਿਲਣਾ, ਤਾਂ ਕਈ ਬੰਦੇ ਸ਼ੌਕ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ that they expected that ਇਹ ਗੁਰਸਿੱਖ non ਗੁਰਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ. Did you have that? I didn't personally experience that. On the first day in the coach, Gursik mein na ki gallan karna pe. As soon as we got to Khalsa camp, while we were waiting for to allocate,
first impression was very positive.
While we were waiting to allocate, because there was in them days Khalsa camp had about 400 people. Wow. It was very, very big, and probably even more than that. And so a lot of the Monday just went and played football until we got our rooms. And so there was a huge football match of 20 against 20 on a rugby pitch at Cardiff University, and by the end of that football match, everyone knew everybody's names.
Wow.
But even if someone was a bit more, like in growing up in Slough, we used to say this thing where, because a lot of the Punjabi Monday used to give each other what we called cut eyes, where they used to look at each other like trying to act bad.
Yeah,
okay. And we always had this thing that our group, that basically if anyone's like that, they have cut eyes. Anyone we saw with a kara, we used to go up to him and say, "How you doing, Baji?"
Okay.
And just break down the barriers, and basically that basically whoever was for us in them days, it was just whoever's Punjabi or Apanaya. And so when we went to camp as well, similarly, I just would just go to people and start talking to them. I've always had that natural confidence. But Gursikhs were all very polite, very nice. But I was actually surprised at how intellectual, how knowledgeable, how the kind of jobs that they had. I had this stereotype that Sikhi was very backward, and these people wearing kurte pajamas.
What jobs did you think they would have
in your mind beforehand? To be honest, up until that point, I'd never seen a Damala and a Chola.
Okay.
I'd just never seen one. But I thought people that were just wore kurta pajama were just a bit backward.
Okay.
And but I understood the spirit. I was more interested in Buddhism at a young age.
Okay.
And I understood that people were spiritual. And because while we were playing football, there was about 40 people in the Darbar Sahib just doing Simran. That sort of struck me. And I thought maybe I should have been doing Simran instead of playing football. As a person who know nothing about Simran, but I thought...
But just the fact they were doing Simran,
I was just thinking that maybe I should have used my time more fruitfully. But during the camp, had very positive experiences. There was people I never met before would come up to me, and there was one Gursikh in particular from Ruislip. He was very, very pyarala. And he intentionally made sure he had the room next to me. He spent a lot of time during the camp with me, and it was very, very nice. And so it was a very positive experience. But there was a few things in the camp that really struck me.
Okay, so which had an impact on you and during the camp?
I think, although we need to bear in mind that 1992 di gal hai. And so it's a long time. Shangarsh chale. And menu eh pata si, I remember growing up 84 de March de vich assi gaye sige. And I remember telly te dekhde sige Darbar Sahib da attack jo Delhi de vich hoya si jado Indira Gandhi mari sigi, oh bhi assi telly te dekhde sige.
Todi umar kinni si? How old were you?
I was probably about 8, 9,
okay.
around then.
So
maybe about 11.
Good memory, you had memory, good memories of what was happening.
But because ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗੇ, the rest of the 80s and early 90s was just didn't know what was going on. So a lot of the lectures, a lot of the ਜਿਹੜੇ topics ਸੀਗੇ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ was based around either Gurmat or is based around ਜੋ ਉੱਥੇ movement ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ. But what struck me was on one day there was a lecture and there was a Gursikh who was wearing full bana. It was actually Bhai Manvir Singh.
Akaal Channel to come present shows. Okay.
And ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹਨੇ ਕੋਲ ਪੂਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਦਮਾਲਾ ਸਜਾਇਆ ਸੀ, ਬਾਣਾ ਪਾਇਆ ਸੀ, and in the middle of his lecture, I think it was called Prey and Predator. It was a very intelligent lecture, and he basically started crying.
Okay.
And when he started crying, I was a bit shocked because I expect Gursikhs never to cry.
Because your background was you were a bit rough and tough kind of. Your background is
we were into martial arts. I always thought Singhs are lion hearts and Singhs just don't cry, and base Singhs are very tough. And so that struck me. I goes, what's going on here? It sort of shook me a bit. And then this whispering went round the hall, and then everyone started getting crying, and it was quite. And I was like, what's going on here? And then Bhai said that Singh to India which one shaheed ho gaye. And when he mentioned his name, just Sukhdev Singh. And everyone was really sad in the Sangat. And I didn't know who Bhai Sukhdev Singh was, and I found out later on that he's a very important Singh in the Apanajo movement. And but I was like, what's going on here? I didn't expect this from at all. And then Bhai Gurram Singh said that ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਯਾਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਆਪਾਂ ਰਾਤ ਨੂੰ ਰਹਿਣ ਸਵਾਈ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ. So the first thing I said to the Singh who was sitting next to me from Ricelip, I said, what's a Ranswai?
Okay.
I don't know what a Ranswai is. And he goes, they're going to sing Kirtan all night. And I goes, am I allowed to go? And he goes, yeah, of course. He goes, Sare Ali khulla hai, tenu te jana chahida hai. And I goes, well, what do you do? And he goes, you sit there, listen to Kirtan. But he said to me specifically, he goes, don't sit at the back of the hall. He goes, sit right behind the Kirtanis and just sing as loud as you can. And I thought, okay. I thought, singing ne bachan karta, so chalo kar lunge.
ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੱਕ ਵੱਡਾ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਹੈ ਭਾਈ ਜੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੇ ਕੀਰਤਨ ਚ ਅੱਗੇ ਬਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਈ ਗੁਰਸਿੱਖ ਭੈਣ ਭਰਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਡਰਦੇ ਉਹ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਬਹਿ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਪਰ it's very important to set at the front. When we break the time ਆ ਗਿਆ when we finish the debate we talk Bhai Jagjit Singh why is it important ਕਿਉਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਫਿਰ ਅੱਗੇ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਕੀਰਤਨ ਸੁਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੁਣ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਸੋ ਫਤਿਹ ਬੁਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back. So, apna show which we are talking to Bhai Jagjit Singh Ji about his journey into Sikhi and his practical tips which we can use, especially newcomers into Sikhi. So, ਅਸੀਂ Bhai Jagjit Singh ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਭੈਣ ਨਵੇਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ 'ਚ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਸੇਧ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ ਭਾਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਕੈਂਪ ਗਏ ਸੀ ਗੁਰਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਖਿਆ ਵੀਰ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਬੈਠੋ he didn't have case then he wasn't in Sikhi Swaroop and he was asked to sit at the front. So ਅਸੀਂ ਭਾਜੀ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਫਿਰ ਅੱਗੇ ਬੈਠਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਉਂ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਆ ਫਾਇਦੇਮੰਦ ਆ why is it beneficial especially if you're a non-Gursikh as well why we should make extra effort to sit near the front. ਹਾਂਜੀ ਭਾਜੀ can you just share upon that?
So Gursikh ne bachan karta si and so I came in to Ranswai must have been about 8 o'clock at night and matha tek liya but I just thought in my mind forna je aaya si thought that basically on aaye on Ranswai son ke jana and
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਬਹਿ ਗਏ
Yeah, and in my mind I was thinking, people probably thinking, what's this Mona doing sitting right at the front?
Okay. Which
but
sangat sitting, they might have their mind, then
I just had in my mind that Jo bhi Maharaj ne karna karna hai. I was very carefree like that, and not to worry about what anyone else thinks. And the next thing I know, because in them days there was no Sikhi to the max.
Okay, so and it was just the screen
yeah, but the Gursikhs were just doing Simran, they were doing Kirtan, and I didn't know much about what they were singing, but every time they were doing Simran, I just joined in with the Simran, and I ended up closing my eyes. It must have been 8 o'clock, and next thing I opened my eyes, and it was about 6 o'clock in the morning.
So, jirani agge baithan di asi sangat nu benti ਕੀਤੀ that you should try to sit at the front, hana? What benefit did you get from that?
It's the energy. It's the fact that if you're sitting at the back, you get distracted, you can fall asleep. There's the energy is always at the core. And Jinnah tusi nere Maharaj de kol beh sakde ho na better. I've always had
vibration that. Kirtan di Gurbani di.
I've never understood why people go into the Darbar Sahib and sit at the back.
Even
when I go to the Gurdwara, I've always had the thing, I've always said to my children, sit as close to Maharaj as possible. You sit right at the front because you're there to learn. And so the energy was really amazing, and it was the first time I'd ever come across Kirtan like that.
Sangati Kirtan, everybody singing together.
Because you heard the Ragis and your Gurdwara, and but this was energetic. This was there was passion in what they were singing.
Right.
And the next thing I knew, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. And
so tonu koi samjh nahi aandi si shabd kehde ga rahe si, no understanding of the Gurbani.
My Punjabi was very minimal. And it was just basically Simran Karde, and it was like that for about a year, because afterwards I fell in love with Kirtan.
So tusi camp muk gaya utte camp te hor koi bhi cheez hoyi hai which you meet anybody?
Kei cheezaं hoiyan that basically I would say that I realized that I was really much into Punjabi community katthe hoye gaye, and then I realized there's actually a higher purpose.
Okay, you realize sirf culture tak nahi, there's something beyond sabhyachar to culture to agge bhi kuch hega ya.
I realized that basically I was interested in Buddhism, but I should have my own Atmik Soch.
Okay.
And I looked at these people and I thought, these people are wise, these people are knowledgeable, these people have got a soul, and I realized there's a huge gap between where they are and where I am. And then I realized actually I need to get somewhere.
I have interest, tonu kisne akhya, tonu kisne kiya fi tusi amar shako case rakho, like directly at that camp?
No one said it to me at the camp, and even if they did, I wouldn't really be phased. I'm not a person who allows other people to make decisions for me.
So because he was very influenced by the camp, and it's amazing that sometimes the best prachar is people's jeevan, when they themselves so much positivity that people like yourself, you said, I want to become like that.
Yeah, it was just basically wisdom dekhi sigi. I saw wisdom, I saw sage, I saw a purpose, a direction in life. And I just realized that I'm someone who was at that point 17. And I realized, you're talking about doctors, Dr. Binder Singh, Dr. Vinder Singh Southall, these people running they're all running the camps. And whereas me, I thought these people are unpars. and actually they're all very, and even there was Harjit Singh Barrister, who's now passed away. He did one of the lectures. And the quality of the vichar, the caliber of the individuals there was very, very high.
Okay.
And so for me, I realized there's a gap and I need to make that gap up.
Okay.
But Atmak Torte, I realized that basically from that day on, I realized actually Kirtan is something that should be really fundamental to my life. And it was quite odd because when I've always been into kind of music and hip hop at that time and soul music. And when I got home and I started listening to them same tracks, I couldn't really get into them like I used to in the past. So within about 2 weeks, I ended up throwing them all away or sidelining them all. And then I used to go to the local singers, Ankar Singh, Hardeep Singh, from they were in the same town. I said, I need Kirtan tapes. And then they started giving me, Hardeep Singh gave me loads of Kirtan tapes, and I just started listening to Kirtan.
Kirtan is a universal thing. Music is universal. So that's why sometimes lecture de vich asi bol ke prachar karde ਉਹਨਾਂ inna young people don't get as much perhaps attracted possibly. But jo Kirtan hunda young or old and of people even if you understand or don't samajh aave na aave sare Kirtan vich enjoy karde ko music universal ya. So it's bari bakshish ya. And I remember from my personal ਲਾਈਫ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਭੰਗੜੇ ਦੇ ਗਾਣੇ ਸੁਣਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਦੇ ਗਾਣੇ ਭੰਗੜੇ ਦੇ ਗਾਣੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਊਥ ਹੋਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਮਨੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਜ਼ where we live and ਉਹਦੇ ਟਿੱਪਾਂ ਖਰੀਦਣੀਆਂ and come back but I wanted to ਕੀਰਤਨ ਦੇ ਟਿੱਪਾਂ ਸੁਣ ਲਈਆਂ then haughty my just again you listen to less and less and the kirtan collection gets bigger and bigger.
It was actually quite dramatic for me because I remember number one at that time was Mariah Carey, I Have a Vision for Love. and I remember listening to that track and she's talking about how she has this vision for love and then about 10 minutes later I flicked the car radio on and basically there was a kirtan tape, I think it was Bhai Jagjit Singh. And he was talking in the Kirtan, I said to my dad, explain to me, and my dad was explaining the Shabd to me about Guru Nanak Dev Ji having this vision of Akaal Purkh. And I remember thinking that, I thought Mariah Carey ain't got a clue. She doesn't know what love is. Guru Nanak Dev Ji knows what love is. And I thought, these people, they sing these songs, but the real emotion is purely in Kirtan. And I thought, that's what made me realise I actually need to understand what Kirtan says as well, not just the energy of Kirtan.
Just for those people who are sitting in the Sangat and they're watching this show, Akaal Channel dekh rahe ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿ ਕੀਰਤਨ ਸੁਣੋ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਕੀਰਤਨ ਇੰਨਾ enjoyable ਆ but you just mentioned a point there that we need to understand ਕੀਰਤਨ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਆ how can people go about doing that and a practice somebody who's not too much into Sikhi but they want to take a step good practical step
I found it hard because well I didn't really find it hard but there's now so much resources. When I was around, when I came, there was no Sikhi to the max.
iPhones.
There was no internet. I used to go on my bike to Southall, which was from Slough probably about 15 miles away. And I used to go to Sikh Missionary and buy loads of books. And then I cycle all the way back. And but there was no real resources. So one of the key things that happened to me at that time was that Bhai Manvir Singh from Slough, he explained to me the power of Ardas. And he goes,
Ardas meaning prayer.
Yeah, and so he said that basically you should start asking him for more.
Asking
for more. Because I used to, because I used to ask Gursic's questions. And he goes, well, tusi Akaal Purkh nu puchya, Guru Granth Sahib nu puchya karo.
Guru Granth Sahib, okay.
And so the thing with me was at that time, I thought I need to understand Sikhi. And so I did an ardas at that time, Ki Maharaj, do not let me leave Darbar Sahib until I find something. And so it went on for months where I would never get out from.
When you go into a gurdwara, you stand in front of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, ardas karne for Maharaj.
I had this assool, and I talk about it in the lectures, is that basically people go. It's like you have a glass, है ना? Imagine in my hand I've got a glass khaliya, and imagine in this hand I've got a jug. Jug is pouring water onto the floor. That's Darbar Sahib.
Yeah,
that basically there's knowledge, there's spiritualism, there's katha, there's kirtan, etc. But oh jera pani o thalle digi janda hai. And this khali glass, which is our mind, oh aa janda hai, oh chal janda hai, aa janda hai, chal janda hai. And basically for 20 years or 10 years or 30 years, depending on the atma, and many people are beginning to go there like that. Khali glass aa janda hai.
Arama si then they jag nu pe jag and kuch jag kuch hai nahi.
Yeah. So basically we got to realize ki assi niv ke aayege. Then you bring your glass down. And then you come to the Darbar Sahib and you fill it.
So humility coming out.
Yeah. So niv ke auna chahiye Darbar Sahib de vich. And so the first thing niv ke auna is that you realize I'm come here to learn. So even if you can't understand the Katha and Kirtan, which I didn't understand at that time because of Punjabi barrier, I used to go to the tabla beat of when they used to do Kirtan, and every time he was on the tabla, I used to sit there, Waheguru, 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 Waheguru. So for me, for many months, I just got Sahaj. I used to go there, I used to find Sahaj, I used to just sit there doing Waheguru, Waheguru Simran, and then I used to just leave by doing Ardas, Maharaj, let me understand Gurbani one day. And then what happened after a few months?
Because we're coming up to the time doesn't stop at time. So
basically, slowly, more and more, I started understanding Kirtan. More and more, started understanding Gurbani. But for me, it was all about I've always felt that Punjabis complicate Sikhi.
Okay. Sir, 1.5 minutes. So,
Punjabis complicate Sikhi, and what you got to do is find the simplicity in Sikhi.
Okay.
So keep it simple. It's basically do your Jodi and the Seva, listen to Gurbani, be sincere in your life, Bande Khoj Dil Har Roj. which means look inside your heart every day and basically try and become a better human being. And you stick to these very simple things and everything falls in place. Gurbani starts falling in place. Don't get too complicated by what's going on with all the other people around you. You know, Sikhi is about a personal journey where you're trying to improve yourself as a human being. And so for me, Maharaj holi holi Gurbani samjho na pi, but then you've got that other challenge is as you understand one snippet of Sikhi is implementing it. है ना, आज में शब्द या निम्रता होनी या सहज होना या कि can I bring it? Can I actually do it?
Time होने वाला. Just a last message, Paji, for the Sangat watching. There's someone coming new into Sikhi. Perhaps 3 tips you can give to them, Hana?
3 tips is basically keep it simple. Don't allow people to steer your journey. Have your own journey and base your journey purely around the Guru Granth Sahib. If you base it around the Guru Granth Sahib, your journey is very pure. And so,
rather than a personality.
Yeah, it's very pure. You have a direct relationship between Atma and Paramatma, and basically it was keep it simple. Do your Jodi in the Seva, do your Nitnem, basically do your Seva, be humble, but do it well. Do the simple things and do them well. If you do the simple things, you do them well, everything else falls in place.
Very good. Thank you very much, Bhai Jagjit Singh ji. Very simple galna, but I'm sure if we just put them in practice, whether they're Gursikh or non-Gursikh, it will be beneficial. So, बहुत धन्यवाद वीर जी, उन्होंने अपने जो personal story share करते, उन्होंने ना some practical tips भी देते हैं. So that's the end of today's Everyday Sikhi show. So thank you much, Bhai Sahib, for coming. Hopefully, come in and share some inspiration with some future shows as well. So Fateh di Sanj upon the Sangat naal, Vaheguru ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru ji ki Fateh.